The twin sisters lived right next door to me in our quiet suburb. Ever since we were toddlers, they fought over which one of them would get to marry me. Our parents always joked that no matter which girl I picked, our families would be tied together forever. But when we got old enough to actually settle down, they both said those years were just childish nonsense. The very next day, they started fighting over a different guy named Jasper. To make Jasper laugh, they pushed me into a freezing river over 6 feet deep, knowing full well I couldn't swim. As I thrashed around gasping for air, they pointed and giggled. Look at him flailing like a drowning dog. Isn't that the funniest thing you've ever seen? They only pulled me out when I was seconds from passing out, just to satisfy Jasper's cruel curiosity. That was the moment my heart turned to ash, and I moved far away from that city. But later, they started hunting for me like they'd lost their minds. The wind cut through my soaked clothes on the walk home, and I couldn't stop shivering. The cold in my body was nothing compared to the ice in my heart. Before I even reached my door, Vivian's name flashed on my phone. Her voice was sharp the second I picked up. Silas, where the hell are you? All you had to do was soak in the water for a bit to make Jasper smile. Why are you making such a big deal out of a little joke? Get back here. Before she finished, Quinn chimed in from the background. Jasper won't cut his birthday cake until you're here. He thinks you're actually mad at him, and it's ruining his mood. We worked so hard to make him happy, so quit being a brat and move it. I tried to answer, but my vision went black. When I opened my eyes, all I could smell was disinfectant. The nurse by my bed didn't hold back. You young people have no respect for your health. You're lucky a good Samaritan found you walking around in wet clothes. With a fever like that, you nearly died. I closed my eyes and said nothing. She asked me to call my family to come stay with me. I waited a long time before whispering. I don't have any family. The whole 2 days I was in the hospital, neither of the foster sisters called me once. Before they met Jasper, I'd call a dozen times. If I was even 30 minutes late for dinner, they panic and ask where I was. Offer to come pick me up now. I've been gone 48 hours and hadn't gotten a single text. The day I was discharged, I paid my own bill and took an Uber home. Before I knew it, I was standing in front of the Fosters' front door. I shook my head at myself and turned to leave. But Jasper's voice drifted through the cracked door. Silas hasn't been back in 2 days. Didn't you girls give him a call? Vivian snorted. He's just throwing a tantrum. He'll come crawling back. Besides, his parents are dead. Where else is he gonna go? He'll show up looking like a kicked dog sooner or later. Quinn agreed. Jasper, you're too nice. Silas was being a buzzkill the other day. Let him suffer outside for a bit. It'll teach him we don't actually need him. But still, Jasper didn't finish, because Vivian clapped a hand over his mouth and told him to hush. Don't let that loser ruin our mood. Jasper glanced toward the door like it was an accident, and locked eyes with me. A smug grin spread across his face. That's when I understood he knew I was standing there. He'd done it all on purpose. I clenched my fists, shaking with rage and heartbreak. That night, I went back to my own house. The first time I'd set foot in my parents' old place since I moved in with the Fosters. After the funeral, in the middle of the night, Jasper called. The second I answered, I heard the sisters screaming at each other. They were fighting over which floor Jasper should sleep on. This used to happen every single day when I first moved in. Vivian lived on the 2nd floor, Quinn on the 3rd. They fight over who got me on their level. Back then, I kept the peace by switching floors every week. Hearing that same old fight now felt like a knife twisting in my chest. Hung up, opened a travel app, and booked a one-way ticket to my hometown for the day after tomorrow. The next morning, I walked into the Foster's house and saw Vivian making breakfast, while Quinn brewed coffee. They both looked up when the door opened, their eyes full of nothing but mockery. Quinn, always blunt, didn't hide it. Oh, look who showed up. I thought you were so tough trying to threaten us by running off. Why are you back, by the way? Jasper's in your old room now. Go move your stuff into the storage closet under the stairs. That closet was where the cleaning lady kept her supplies. I looked at Vivian, hoping she'd think Quinn had gone too far. Instead, she just looked worried about Jasper. I don't want Silas being here to make Jasper uncomfortable. Maybe it's better if he goes back to his own house for good. Quinn nodded hard. He's not even part of this family. He's just been leeching off us. Jasper's different. He's sensitive. I don't want him feeling awkward with Silas lurking around. Hard to believe these were the same girls who clung to my sleeves. At my mother's funeral, back then they begged me to move in, promising to take care of me forever. Now I was just a leech who didn't know when to leave. I couldn't understand how people's hearts could change so fast. Before I could say anything, Quinn grabbed my arm and shoved me toward the door. Get out before Jasper wakes up. I don't want him seeing your face and getting depressed. Vivian's voice followed me as the door slammed. Change the keypad code, too. We don't want him sneaking back in. I didn't even get to tell them I'd only come for my passport and ID. I took a deep breath, went to the government office, and reported my documents lost so I could get temporary replacements. Then I called a real estate agent. I decided to sell the house my parents left me. It hurt to let go, but I was never coming back to this city. After that, I stopped by the grocery store to buy ingredients for a decent meal. I'd always been sickly, and the Foster sisters used to take turns cooking for me. They said outside food was poison, and couldn't stand to see me get sick. I remembered posting once about craving a spicy peanut sauté burger. Next day, Vivian showed up with a homemade version. I noticed little cuts and burns on her hands and asked what happened. She hid them behind her back like it was nothing. I just got a little messy trying to get the recipe right for you. I felt so guilty and so grateful. I was just craving it. Vivian, you didn't have to go through all that. I could have just ordered takeout. She frowned and said she'd never let me eat low-quality food as long as she was around. Quinn was the same, stayed up all night, once learning to bake my favorite cake from scratch. Their mom used to joke it was a shame polygamy was illegal, or I could have married both her daughters. Now all of that felt like a dream from another life, but it didn't matter. I was leaving tomorrow. When I unlocked my front door, I froze. This sisters and Jasper were sitting comfortably in my living room. I cursed myself for not changing the code the second I got home. Silas, you're back. I really wanted to see your childhood home, so the girls brought me over. You don't mind, right? Jasper stood up with a fake sparkling smile before I could answer. Quinn snapped at him for only mentioning Vivian. Jasper, if you don't give me a hug right now, I'm going to be very offended. Jasper laughed and played along, making a big show of it. I ignored the circus and walked straight into the kitchen to cook. Quinn used to be so jealous of my attention. If I spent 5 extra minutes talking to Vivian, she'd pout for hours. I used to tease her for being a brat, and she'd just grin and say she was only like that because it was me. I thought I was special to them. Turns out I was just a placeholder until someone better came along. While I was chopping vegetables, Jasper wandered in looking nervous. Silas, why are you so quiet? Are you mad? I came without an invitation. I didn't mean anything by it. I just wanted to see where you grew up. I didn't look up.
You've seen it now.
Leave. Quinn stormed in, her face dark.
Silas.
What is your problem? Jasper's just being friendly. He wants to be your friend. You jerk. Honestly, I should have kicked you out years ago. If I'd known you'd be this ungrateful. Vivian walked in behind her looking just as disgusted. You're being pathetic, Silas. Apologize to Jasper right now. I slammed the knife down and laughed coldly. You break into my house and demand I apologize? Are you insane? Jasper's eyes welled up right on cue. Silas, I know you hate me, but please don't yell at the girls. Breaks my heart to see them sad. The sisters rushed to his side, cooing over him like a wounded puppy. Vivian glared at me with pure hatred. What is wrong with you? No wonder people used to bully the hell out of you. In school, the words hit me like a punch and my head spun. In middle school, I was small and quiet, an easy target. Kids called me horrible names and treated me like trash. Once they locked me in the music room overnight. I sat in the dark corner shaking with terror until the sun came up. It was Vivian who braved a thunderstorm to find me. She searched every room in the school until she heard me crying. The next day, Quinn tracked down the security footage and dragged the principal into it. She made sure every kid who touched me got suspended. It's true what they say. The people who know you best know exactly where to twist the knife. Vivian saw my face go pale and seemed to realize she'd gone too far. But before she could say anything, Jasper cut in. Silas is clearly upset. Maybe I should just go. Quinn immediately turned back to him. Don't be sad, baby. I'll go home and make you that honey-glazed pear dessert you like. That was my favorite dessert. Quinn had spent weeks in a cooking class just to master it. For me now, it was only a tool to comfort her new favorite toy. I watched them leave, my decision to move away hardening into steel. But that evening, the three of them pushed my door open again. Vivian was holding a takeout container with a smug look on her face. I stared at them, confused about what game they were playing now. Vivian set a bowl of spicy peanut sauté noodles in front of me. I made this myself. Taste it and tell me if it's as good as the old days. For a second, my heart softened. Then I remembered the freezing river and their laughter on the bank. No thanks. I'm not hungry. Vivian froze, her pride turning to irritation. I went out of my way to bring you this. And you're gonna be a dick about it. We stared each other down for a minute until I finally gave in, just wanting them gone. I figured since I was leaving tomorrow, one meal wouldn't kill me. But after 2 bites, something tasted off. I looked up. Why does this taste different? She smiled. I added a special blend of ground beef and extra peanut butter to the sauce. My chopsticks clattered to the floor. I stared at her in horror. Vivian, you know I have a severe allergy to beef and peanuts. She rolled her eyes and waved me off. Oh, please. Jasper wanted to know if someone could really be allergic to both. At once. I told him. You were probably just being dramatic all these years. Look at you, you're fine. Stop playing the victim. For once. Quinn nodded, checking her watch.
See 2 allergens, and he's not dead.
Jasper, I win the bet. You have to drive me to work tomorrow. Without another word, they turned and walked out laughing with Jasper. The second the door clicked shut, my throat started to tighten. I gasped for air and scrambled for my EpiPen, only to realize all my medication was still at the foster house. I managed to dial 911 before my vision failed, and I collapsed. When I woke up, the smell of bleach was back. The doctor told me I was lucky to be alive and needed to stay for observation. I didn't sleep a wink that night. The next morning, I checked myself out and went straight to the airport with my bags packed. I didn't forget to change my home's entry code. On the way out, I told my real estate agent I'd give him a 5% bonus if he handled everything without calling me. As the plane got ready for takeoff, my phone lit up with dozens of calls from the sisters. I turned it off and didn't look back. The cabin of the aircraft was quiet, filled only with the low, monotonous drone of the jet engines and the occasional rustle of a page turning. I leaned my forehead against the double-paned window, staring out at the gray, fractured floor of clouds thousands of feet below. My throat still felt dry and raw, a lingering souvenir from the emergency room. Every breath I took carried a faint, phantom taste of copper and charcoal, the aftermath of the epinephrine and the steroids they had pumped into my veins to stop my airway from closing. When the flight attendant passed by, offering a complimentary snack mix, I instinctively shook my head and pulled my hands into my jacket pockets. The fear of food, of trusting anything prepared by someone else, had settled deep into my bones, a cold, quiet weight that I knew would take
Years to lift.
I pulled out my phone. The screen was dark. Before the flight attendant had called for electronic devices to be switched to airplane mode, the notifications had been cascading down the screen like a broken dam. Vivian, Silas, answer your phone. Where are you? The real estate agent is at your house with a lockbox. What is going on? Quinn, Silas, stop playing games. This isn't funny. We went to your place and the code didn't work. Did you seriously change it? Vivian, Silas, please. Jasper is upset. He thinks you're doing this to ruin his weekend. Call me back right now. There were 14 missed calls from Vivian, 9 from Quinn, and 3 from an unknown number that I suspected belonged to Jasper. I popped the SIM card tray open with a straightened paperclip I had kept in my pocket. The tiny piece of plastic slid out. I held it between my thumb and forefinger for a moment, looking at the golden contacts that had kept me tethered to them, to their demands, to their shifting whims. Then I dropped it into the small paper cup of lukewarm water the flight attendant had left on my
Tray.
The water distorted the shape of the card, turning it into a shimmering, harmless speck at the bottom. When the plane finally touched down in my hometown, the air was different.
It
Wasn't the heavy, humid heat of the city I had left behind, but a crisp, sharp autumn chill that smelled of damp earth and fallen pine needles. I took a taxi to a small, furnished apartment I had rented online using a portion of the savings my parents had left me. It was on the second floor of an old brick building near the river, not the rushing, dangerous river of the city, but a wide, slow-moving canal where ducks floated lazily near the banks. The apartment was sparse. A creaky wooden bed, a small kitchen with laminate countertops, and a single window that looked out over an alleyway and a small bakery. It was perfect because it belonged to no one else, and no one here knew my name. On my third day, the real estate agent, Mr. Vance, emailed me. Silas, the house is sold. We had in cash offer slightly below asking, but they wanted a 3-week escrow and no contingencies. I took the liberty of signing the preliminary paperwork on your behalf, as authorized. The funds should clear your account by the end of the month. By the way, 2 young ladies and a young man showed up during the final walkthrough yesterday. They seemed quite agitated and insisted on knowing where you had gone. I told them I was legally bound by non-disclosure and could not share your forward address. I hope that was correct. I typed a brief reply. Thank you, Mr. Vance. That was perfect. Please ensure the remainder of the transaction is handled through your office. I have no intention of returning. I closed my laptop and stood up, walking to the small stove. I had bought fresh vegetables, rice, and a small portion of chicken from the local market. For the first time in my life, I prepared my own dinner from scratch, carefully checking every label, washing every utensil twice. The silence in the room was heavy, but it was no longer suffocating.
It was a
Blank canvas. 3 months passed. In a small town, life moves at a different pace. I found a part-time job at the local archive and historical society, cataloging old land deeds and photographs from the 19th century. The work was quiet, repetitive, and kept me in a basement room filled with the scent of old paper and leather.
It suited me. My
Health began to return. The dark circles under my eyes faded, and the constant, nervous tremor in my hands slowly disappeared. I had bought a new phone with a local number, sharing it only with my real estate agent and my landlord. One evening, after returning from a shift at the archives, I opened my laptop to check my email. Among the spam and newsletters, there was a message from an address I didn't recognize, but the subject line made my breath hitch. Silas, please. It was from Vivian. She must have guessed my old email address or found it in one of the accounts we used to share for streaming services. Silas, I don't know if you'll read this, but we are desperate. Jasper is gone. He took Quinn's car and the credit card my mother left us for emergencies.
he's
Been gone for 3 days. The police won't do anything because he's an adult, and we gave him the card voluntarily, but we have no money to pay the mortgage on our house this month. Our parents are furious with us. They found out you moved away and that you sold your house. They think we did something to drive you off. Silas, please, if you have any decency left, help us. We're your sisters.
we
Took care of you when your parents died. How can you be so cold? I read the email twice. My hand hovered over the keyboard. A part of me, the old Silas, the boy who had spent his teenage years trying to keep the peace between two fiery, demanding girls, felt a familiar, instinctive pull to solve their problem. I remembered Quinn staying up all night to bake that cake. I remembered Vivian's burnt hands from the sauté recipe. But then, the phantom sensation of cold river water filling my lungs returned.
I
Remembered the sound of their laughter while I struggled to breathe.
I
Remembered the smug, knowing grin on Jasper's face as he watched me from the kitchen doorway, and the taste of the peanut and beef mixture that had nearly ended my life for the sake of a $20 bet. They hadn't sent that email because they missed me. They sent it because their shield was gone. Jasper had been a parasite, but they had invited him in, fed him, and sacrificed their oldest friend to keep him happy. Now that the parasite had finished feeding on me, he had turned on them. I deleted the email. Then, I set up a filter to automatically send any messages containing the words Vivian, Quinn, or Jasper straight to the trash folder. 2 weeks later, the real estate agent called my new phone. Silas. Mr. Vance's voice sounded strained. I'm sorry to bother you. I know, you asked for no contact, but I have a bit of a situation here. Those two young women from before, they've been coming to my office every day. They're demanding your contact information. One of them, the blonde one, Quinn, I think, was crying in the lobby yesterday, saying it was a life or death matter. My secretary was quite shaken. I threatened to call the police, but they said they wouldn't leave until they got an address. Did you give it to them? I asked, my voice flat. Of course not, Mr. Vance said quickly. Professional ethics, Silas.
but they
Did leave a letter. They asked me to forward it to you. I can scan it and email it, or I can shred it. It's up to you. Shred it, Mr. Vance, I said. And if they come back, please do call the
police.
They have no legal claim to me, and I have no interest in whatever they have to say. Understood, Silas. I'll take care of it. I hung up and sat on the edge of my bed. The sun was setting, casting long, orange shadows across the hardwood floor. I realized my heart wasn't pounding.
I
Wasn't shaking. The terror that had defined my life for the past year had turned into something else, a cold, hard indifference. The winter in my hometown was harsh. The canal froze over, turning into a solid sheet of gray ice that reflected the pale, weak sun. I spent my days wrapped in a wool coat, walking the quiet streets after my shifts at the archive. I had made a few acquaintances, the baker across the street, an elderly woman who volunteered at the Historical Society, and a quiet man named Thomas who ran the local hardware store. They didn't ask about my past, and I didn't volunteer details. To them, I was just a quiet young man who had returned to his roots. After a brief, unsuccessful stint in the city, in February, I received a physical letter in my mailbox. The return address was local, a motel on the highway just outside the town limits. The handwriting on the envelope was instantly recognizable. Vivian's. Neat, slanted script. Though it looked rushed, the ink smudged in several places. They had found me. I stood in my small kitchen, holding the envelope. The paper felt slightly damp from the winter air. I opened it with a butter knife. Silas, we know you're here. We hired a private investigator. It took almost all the money we had left, but we had to find you. We're staying at the Pines Motel off Route 4, Room 12. Please come see us. Just once. We don't want your money. We just want to talk. We're in trouble, Silas. Real trouble. Jasper, he didn't just take the car. He had some bad people looking for him, and they came to our house. They broke the windows. They threatened our parents. Our dad had a mild heart attack from the stress, and he's in the hospital. He won't even look at us now. We made a mistake. We know we did. We were stupid and we let ourselves get carried away because we thought you'd always be there. We thought you were our brother, our family. We didn't think you'd actually leave us. Please, Silas. Just come to the motel. We'll be waiting. Vivian and Quinn. I laid the letter on the kitchen table. The mention of their father, Mr. Foster, gave me a brief pang of sorrow. He had been a good man, quiet and hardworking, who had welcomed me into his home when my own parents died. He hadn't known about the river incident or the food allergy bet. The girls had undoubtedly hidden their cruelty from him. But the sorrow didn't extend to the twins. We thought you'd always be there, they wrote. That was the core of it. I had been a utility, a permanent fixture of their lives like a piece of old furniture. You don't worry about kicking a chair or spilling water on a table, because you expect it to remain in the room, silent and functional, whenever you decide to return. I didn't go to the motel that night. I didn't go the next day either. On the third night, the temperature dropped to 5 degrees. The wind howled through the gaps in my window frames, whistling a low, mournful tune. At 9 p.m., there was a knock at my door. It wasn't a loud, aggressive knock, but a soft, hesitant tapping. I stood in the center of the living room, my body freezing. I knew who it was. The motel was only a 3-mile walk from the town center, and they had likely seen me walking home from the archive. I walked to the door, unlocked it, and pulled it open. Vivian and Quinn stood on the landing. They looked nothing like the polished, fashionable girls who had mocked me in the kitchen 3 months ago. Their expensive winter coats were dirty and salt-stained at the hems. Quinn's hair, usually kept in a perfect, sleek bob, was greasy and tied back in a messy knot. Vivian's face was pale, her lips chapped and blue from the cold. They were shivering violently, their hands tucked deep into their sleeves. Silas, Vivian whispered. Her voice cracked. Thank God. She reached out, her hand trembling as she tried to touch my arm. I stepped back, just out of her reach, keeping my hand firmly on the edge of the door. What do you want? I asked. My voice was quiet, lacking any warmth or anger. It was the tone you would use with a stranger who had knocked on your door by mistake. Quinn pushed past her sister, her eyes wide and bloodshot. Silas, let us in. Please. It's freezing out here. We've been waiting downstairs for 2 hours. No, I said. The word was small, but it seemed to strike them like a physical blow. Quinn froze, her mouth slightly open. What do you mean, no? She asked, her old, demanding tone rising for a fraction of a second before dying out under the weight of her exhaustion. Silas, we're freezing. We don't have any money left for the motel. They kicked us out this morning because our card was declined. We haven't eaten since yesterday. There's a shelter near the church 3 blocks down, I said. They serve hot soup until 10. Vivian's eyes filled with tears, which immediately began to freeze on her pale cheeks. Silas, how can you say that to us? We're your sisters. We lived together for 10 years. We grew up next door to each other. My parents are dead, I said. I don't have any sisters, and the people I lived next door to wouldn't have watched me drown to make a stranger laugh. That was a mistake. Quinn cried, her hands clenching into fists. We didn't know you couldn't swim. We thought you were exaggerating. And the sauté noodles? I asked. Did you think my allergy was an exaggeration, too? When you bet Jasper you could feed me peanuts and beef without me dying? The silence that followed was absolute. Only the sound of the wind rattling the alleyway gate below us broke the quiet. Vivian looked down at the floor, her shoulders slumping. Jasper said. It was all a joke. He said you were just trying to get attention.
He was so
Charming, Silas. He made us feel like we were the only girls in the world, and then he started asking for things. First it was small, then he wanted us to sign over the title to the car. When we said no, he got
angry.
He told us we were nothing compared to the girls he could get in the
City.
He said we were just small-town losers. I don't care, I said. Silas, please, Vivian sobbed, dropping to her knees on the cold concrete. Landing. We're sorry. We're so sorry. We'll do anything. We'll clean your apartment. We'll cook for you real food, safe food, we promise. Just don't leave us out here. We have nowhere else to go. Our dad won't let us back in the house. He said we ruined our family's reputation and drove away the only decent person who ever cared about us. I looked at them. I looked at Vivian, kneeling on the dirty floor, and Quinn, leaning against the wall with her head in her hands, weeping silently. Once, these girls had been my entire world. When my mother died, I had held their hands and believed their promise that we would be together forever.
But
that promise had been cheap, a childhood fantasy that dissolved the moment. Someone more exciting, someone sensitive like Jasper, had smiled at them. They hadn't changed because they realized they had hurt me. They had changed because they were cold, hungry, and alone. If Jasper had stayed, if he had continued to treat them well while using my money, they would still be in the city, laughing at the memory of the drowning dog. I hope your father recovers, I said quietly. Silas. Quinn reached out, her eyes desperate. But we are finished, I said. Don't come back here. If I see you near my apartment or my workplace again, I will call the police and file a restraining order. I have the medical records from both of my hospital stays. The doctors were very clear about what happened to me. I don't think your parents would like to see those records in a courtroom. Vivian looked up at me, her face pale with horror. She realized, finally, that the boy they had bullied, the boy who had always yielded to their tantrums and kept the peace, was gone. In his place was a man who felt nothing for them but a cold, empty distance. Goodbye, Vivian. Goodbye, Quinn. I closed the door. I turned the deadbolt, the metallic click sounding loud and final in the quiet apartment. Outside, I heard Quinn let out a low, ragged sob, and then the slow, dragging sound of their footsteps descending the wooden stairs. I walked into my kitchen, turned on the kettle, and waited for the water to
boil.
The room was warm, the tea was hot, and for the first time in 3 years, I felt entirely safe. Spring arrived in the valley, melting the thick sheets of ice on the canal and turning the brown, dead hills into a vibrant, brilliant green. I had stayed true to my word. The twins never returned to my apartment. I later heard from Mr. Vance, who had spoken to a colleague in the city, that Vivian and Quinn had eventually returned to their parents' home. Their father had recovered, but the family dynamics had permanently fractured. The twins were working low-paying jobs in a local department store to pay off the debts Jasper had run up in their names. Jasper himself had vanished, likely moving on to another town, another set of victims who were foolish enough to believe his sparkling hollow smile. My life, meanwhile, continued its quiet, steady trajectory. I was promoted to a full-time position at the Historical Archives. I spent my days organizing the letters of people who had lived and loved 100 years ago, their dramas and heartbreaks preserved in faded ink on yellowing paper. It gave me a strange sense of perspective. Our lives are so small, our tragedies so brief in the grand scale of time. One Saturday afternoon, while walking through the local farmer's market, I stopped at a small stall selling fresh herbs and homemade bread. The woman behind the counter, a quiet girl named Claire, who had recently moved to the area to work at the local library, smiled as I approached. Silas, she said, wiping her hands on her apron. I was hoping I'd see you
Today.
I tried that recipe for the vegetable broth you mentioned last week.
It
was delicious and completely safe, no additives, no preservatives. I'm glad, I said, offering a small, genuine smile. It's always better when you make it yourself. It is, she agreed, handing me a small paper bag of fresh basil. Are you free this evening? A few of us from the library are going down to the canal to watch the sunset. We're bringing some safe snacks. I'd love it if you came. I hesitated for a fraction of a second. The old fear, the defensive instinct to withdraw and protect myself from the world, flared up. But then I looked at her. Eyes, clear, honest, and entirely devoid of the sharp, mocking edge I had grown so used to in the city. "I'd like that, Claire," I said. "Thank you." As I walked back to my apartment, the fresh scent of basil drifting from the bag in my hand, I looked up at the blue, cloudless sky. The wind was warm, carrying the scent of blooming apple blossoms from the orchards. The ice in my heart had finally melted, leaving behind nothing but clean, quiet ground, ready for something new to grow.